He wasn't supposed to speak. Just sit quietly beside his sister while she explained a simple parking ticket. But when Judge Caprio asked who was responsible, the 12-year-old boy did something that made the entire courtroom fall silent. He raised his hand. What came next wasn't defiance or fear, it was honesty in its purest form. He confessed to something so small it barely mattered in law, yet so meaningful it moved everyone who heard it. Even Judge Caprio, known for his calm humor and compassion, leaned forward in disbelief as the boy's voice trembled but never faltered. He didn't try to excuse himself. He didn't shift the blame. He simply told the truth, and in doing so reminded everyone in that room what integrity really sounds like when spoken by a child. The bailiff stopped shuffling papers. The gallery, usually full of whispers and laughter, went silent. And as the boy finished speaking, a soft smile crossed the judge's face, the kind that carries both pride and awe. It wasn't about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about something deeper, the courage to own up even when no one expects you to. Before we show you exactly what this young boy said that melted Judge Caprio's heart, take a second to join our community of people who still believe in kindness, truth, and second chances. Subscribe to Real Judge Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss these real moments of humanity inside the courtroom. And before the story unfolds, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Because today's story isn't about rules, it's about a voice so small and sincere that it reminded everyone listening. Sometimes the biggest hearts come in the smallest voices. The soft hum of conversation filled Judge Caprio's courtroom that morning. Papers shuffled, footsteps echoed across polished marble, and a few nervous laughs rippled through the benches. It was the ordinary rhythm of small infractions and everyday mistakes, the kind of morning where people came hoping for mercy, not miracles. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses with that familiar calm that could melt even the stiffest anxiety. "All right," he said warmly, "let's see who we have next." The clerk read aloud, "City of Providence versus Miss Lena Morales." From the benches, a young woman stood. 17, maybe 18, wearing a simple denim jacket and holding a thin envelope of papers that trembled slightly in her hands. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't her, it was the small boy walking beside her. He looked no older than 12, his dark hair neatly combed, a backpack clutched tightly to his chest as if it were a shield. They moved toward the podium together. Lena kept her head high. The boy, Eli Morales, walked half a step behind, eyes darting around the courtroom. Every creak of a chair seemed too loud for him. He wasn't supposed to speak, he was only there for moral support. Judge Caprio smiled when they reached the front. "You two look like you belong in a classroom, not a courtroom," he said with a grin. A gentle laugh swept through the room, loosening the air. Even Eli managed a shy smile. Lena swallowed, then spoke softly. "Good morning, Your Honor. I'm Lena Morales and this is my brother Eli. We're here about a traffic ticket." Caprio tilted his head, feigning surprise. "A traffic ticket? You're not old enough to drive yet, young man?" Eli shook his head quickly. "No, sir. I just sit in the passenger seat." Laughter rippled again, light, genuine, human. The judge nodded approvingly. "Good. Let's hope it stays that way." What no one in that courtroom knew yet was that this ordinary morning, and this nervous boy, were about to turn into one of the most unforgettable moments Judge Caprio would ever witness. Judge Caprio skimmed the paperwork for a moment, then looked up with his trademark half-smile. "Obstruction of driver's view," he read aloud. "That sounds serious. What was blocking the view, Miss Morales?" Lena hesitated. "Oh, something, Your Honor." "Something?" the judge repeated, pretending to frown. "Was it a parrot? A giant balloon? Or maybe a ghost you're trying to hide from me?" A ripple of laughter ran through the courtroom. Even the bailiff grinned. Lena blushed. "It was my brother's backpack, sir." Caprio leaned forward. "His backpack." He turned toward Eli. "Was it driving the car or just enjoying the view?" The crowd chuckled again. Eli covered his mouth, embarrassed but amused. Lena tried to explain. "I parked outside the school for a minute, went back in to get my phone. When I returned, I didn't notice his bag sitting on the dashboard. The officer pulled me over a block later." Caprio nodded slowly, tapping his pen. "Ah, the mysterious flying backpack. They're notorious around Providence." Eli giggled. "It wasn't flying, sir. I just didn't want to hold it. It's heavy." The judge feigned horror. "Heavy? How many bricks are you carrying, young man?" "Books, and my lunch," Eli answered innocently. "Books and lunch, both dangerous weapons in the wrong hands," Caprio said, pretending to warn the bailiff. More laughter filled the room, softening the tension completely. For a moment it didn't feel like court, it felt like a living room where everyone had the same inside joke. "You seem like a responsible young man," the judge said warmly. "Do you always ride with your sister?" "Yes, sir. Every day. She takes me to school." "That's a good sister," Caprio said. "Does she make you pay for gas?" Eli frowned in thought. "Sometimes I buy her chips, or ice cream." The audience laughed again. Caprio smiled. "Chips for gas. That's called inflation, son. But I respect a negotiator." Lena hid her smile behind the envelope. Caprio glanced at both siblings, still amused. "Well, I have to say this is my favorite case of the day. A dashboard, a backpack, and a brotherly witness. What could possibly go wrong?" The laughter began to fade, replaced by a quiet anticipation neither of them noticed. Because in the next few moments, that same shy boy who made the courtroom laugh would leave them speechless, and remind Judge Caprio why kindness sometimes enters the room wearing a school uniform. Judge Caprio flipped through the papers, pretending to study them like a serious criminal case. Then, glancing over his glasses, he looked straight at Eli. "So, young man," he said, "you were sitting in the passenger seat when your sister got pulled over?" Eli nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." "And did you notice your backpack sitting on the dashboard while she was driving?" For a second Eli froze. His sneakers tapped nervously against the floor. The courtroom quieted, no laughter now, just the sound of a dozen people waiting. Then in a small but steady voice he said, "Yes, sir. I saw it." Lena's head turned sharply. "Eli," she whispered. The boy looked down, fidgeting with his fingers. "I didn't mean to get her in trouble." A gentle smile spread across Judge Caprio's face. "Ah," he said softly, "so the real culprit reveals himself." A few people chuckled, but the humor had changed, lighter, almost tender. Caprio leaned forward. "Tell me, son, why didn't you say something when the officer stopped you?" Eli hesitated, eyes on the floor. "Because I thought maybe, if I stayed quiet, she wouldn't get a ticket." The courtroom went still again. Lena's eyes softened. The bailiff stopped shifting in his chair. Caprio studied the boy for a long moment. "You didn't want her to get in trouble, even though it was your backpack?" Eli nodded. "Yes, sir. She's always helping me. I didn't want her to feel bad." The judge's tone changed, less playful, more curious, almost fatherly. "That's a pretty big heart you've got there, son." Eli looked up shyly. "My mom says I talk too much, but when it's my fault, I have to say it." A few quiet laughs fluttered through the room, mixed with sniffles from those who weren't expecting to feel so much emotion in traffic court. Lena sighed, shaking her head with a small smile. "He's too honest for his own good, Your Honor." Caprio chuckled softly. "That's a rare problem in this room, Miss Morales." The judge folded his hands and looked back at Eli. "So, let me understand this. You knew it was your backpack, you saw your sister get pulled over, and you stayed quiet because you didn't want her to worry?" Eli nodded again, this time firmly. Caprio leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "You know, I've been doing this a long time. Most people come here with excuses. They blame the officer, the weather, the universe, anyone but themselves. But you just told the truth when you didn't have to." Eli's voice wavered slightly. "It didn't feel right to hide it, sir." Caprio smiled faintly. "Well, I think we can all agree this courtroom just got a lesson in honesty." The gallery murmured in agreement, a few people smiling through tears. The judge let the silence linger for a moment before speaking again. "Son," he said gently, "I have a feeling this story isn't over yet. There's something else you want to say, isn't there?" Eli looked up, his small hands gripping the wooden podium. "Yes, sir. There's more." Caprio tilted his head. "Then go ahead, son. The floor is yours." The boy took a deep breath, gathering courage that no one expected from a 12-year-old. What came next would turn a simple morning hearing into one of the most unforgettable moments Judge Caprio, and everyone watching, would ever experience. Eli took a small step closer to the microphone, his voice trembling but steady. "I know my sister didn't mean to break the rule," he said softly. "It was my backpack. So, I think I should be the one to pay for the ticket." A few people in the audience gasped. Lena's eyes widened. "Eli, no, you don't have to." But before she could finish, Judge Caprio gently raised his hand, signaling her to stop. The judge leaned forward, curiosity dancing in his eyes. "You want to pay for the ticket yourself?" Eli nodded. "Yes, sir." Caprio blinked, pretending to be shocked. "You realize that's $75, right?" "Yes, sir," Eli said again, his voice quiet but firm. "I've been saving money since Christmas. I get $5 a week for helping my mom around the house. A soft murmur filled the courtroom. People smiled, some shook their heads in disbelief, others wiped away tears. The bailiff whispered to the clerk, "That kid's more honest than half the city." Caprio chuckled. "So, you've been saving your pocket money to help at home, and now you want to spend it to pay for your sister's ticket?" Eli nodded again. "She always helps me, sir. When I forget my homework, she turns the car around. When I don't have lunch, she shares hers. She even wakes up early to make sure I'm not late. So I think it's my turn to help her." The room fell silent. For a moment, the courtroom, a place built for laws, fines, and arguments, felt more like a church, sacred and still. Judge Caprio looked down at the boy, his voice softer now. "You'd give up 15 weeks of your pocket money just to help your sister?" Eli smiled faintly. "Yes, sir. She takes care of me every day. It's only fair that I take care of her once." A woman in the back wiped her eyes. The bailiff shifted awkwardly, pretending to clear his throat. Even Lena couldn't speak, she just looked at her brother, tears blurring her vision. Caprio sighed deeply, shaking his head with admiration. "You know something, son? I've had people come here blaming everyone but themselves. But you," he paused, smiling gently, "you're taking responsibility that isn't even yours." Eli shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's what family does." For a long, quiet moment, Judge Caprio said nothing. The air in the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Then finally he leaned forward with that warm, fatherly smile the world knows so well. "Son," he said softly, "you might just be the youngest gentleman ever to stand in this courtroom." And with those words, the entire room erupted into quiet applause, soft, genuine, full of awe. Judge Caprio sat back in his chair, the gavel resting loosely in his hand. The applause faded into a gentle hush, leaving behind only the soft buzz of ceiling lights and the quiet rhythm of emotion that lingered in the air. He looked at Eli for a moment, not as a judge evaluating a case but as a man seeing something pure. "You know, son," he began slowly, "I've met thousands of people in this courtroom. Some angry, some frightened, some just confused. But I don't often meet someone who reminds me why this bench exists in the first place." Eli tilted his head, unsure what to say. The judge smiled. "The law isn't just about rules," he continued. "It's about understanding, about finding out why something happened before deciding what's fair." He turned his gaze to Lena, who still looked overwhelmed. "Miss Morales, you're lucky to have a brother like him." Lena nodded through a tearful laugh. "I know, Your Honor. He drives me crazy sometimes, but he's got a good heart." Caprio chuckled softly. "That's the best kind of crazy." The crowd laughed with him, easing the heavy silence. Then his voice grew tender again. "Tell me, son, how much have you saved so far?" Eli thought for a moment. $35, sir." Caprio raised his eyebrows, impressed. 35. When I was your age, I couldn't even save a nickel. You're practically a banker." The courtroom laughed again, but this time it wasn't amusement, it was admiration. Caprio's tone shifted, warm yet deliberate. "If you keep being this honest, Eli, you'll do just fine in life. Maybe even take my job one day." Eli smiled shyly. "Only if it comes with ice cream breaks, sir." The judge laughed, tapping the bench lightly. "Ice cream breaks, noted." Then after a pause his tone softened. "You know something, son? The world could use a few more people like you. People who take responsibility not because they have to, but because it's right." He exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling. "And as for this ticket," he tapped the paper once, then looked directly at Lena and Eli. "I think your family's already paid more than enough." The courtroom stayed silent, waiting for his final word. Caprio smiled, lifted his gavel gently, and said the words that would stay with everyone there. "Case dismissed." The soft crack of the gavel echoed like a heartbeat, one filled with kindness, laughter, and quiet gratitude. Outside the courthouse, the morning sun washed over the stone steps, turning them gold. The air felt lighter, like the kind that follows a story that ended the way it should. Lena and Eli walked side by side, the crisp air filling the space where nerves once lived. Lena still held the folded ticket papers, now stamped dismissed. She looked down at them, then at her little brother, who was swinging his backpack from one shoulder to the other, humming like a kid who had just saved the world. "You know," she said, her tone half stern and half smiling, "you didn't have to do that back there." Eli shrugged, eyes bright. "I know. But you looked nervous, and I didn't want Judge Caprio to think you were in trouble." Lena laughed softly, shaking her head. "You really think like an adult sometimes." He smiled. "Someone has to." They reached the bottom of the steps. A breeze caught the edge of the old ticket, tugging it from her hand. She reached out instinctively but then stopped and watched it flutter away, down the stairs, across the street, and into a puddle that swallowed it whole. Eli grinned. Guess the case really is gone now. Yeah, she said, watching it drift out of sight. It's gone. They started walking again, passing a couple who smiled at them knowingly. For a few steps they didn't speak. Then Lena reached out and rested her hand on his shoulder. Thank you, Eli, she said quietly, for standing up for me. He looked up at her, his grin soft but proud. You do it for me all the time. I just wanted to try it once. She laughed, ruffling his hair. You're something else, you know that? He wrinkled his nose. Yeah, Mom says that too. As they disappeared down the sidewalk, their laughter echoed faintly against the courthouse walls. Inside, Judge Caprio stood near the window watching them go. Two small figures, one steady, one skipping, walking together into the bright morning. He smiled and murmured to himself, that's what justice should look like. And with that, he turned back to his bench, ready for the next case, his heart just a little lighter than before. The courtroom had emptied, leaving only quiet echoes where laughter had been. But for those who'd witnessed it, the memory of that boy's honesty lingered like sunlight that refuses to fade. Judge Caprio adjusted his papers, then glanced one last time toward the door where Lena and Eli had left. A faint smile crossed his face, not the smile of a judge who'd closed a case, but of a man reminded why compassion still matters. He looked at the camera and said softly, if everyone took responsibility like that child did today, maybe this courtroom wouldn't need to exist. His words hung in the air, honest and gentle, the kind that stay with you long after the gavel falls. And now it's your turn to reflect. Would you have done what Eli did? Would you have raised your hand and spoken the truth, even when it wasn't easy? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story touched you, reminded you of the power of kindness, or restored even a little of your faith in people, don't forget to show your support. Subscribe to Real Judge Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss moments like this. Real lives, real lessons, and real compassion inside the courtroom. Share this video with someone who could use a reminder that honesty still wins, love still protects, and sometimes the smallest voices deliver the greatest truths. Because in Judge Caprio's courtroom, and in life, every act of decency counts.